Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily, and today I am going to talk to you about the Pacific Coast Highway, about traveling through California, and together we are going to go on a bit of an audio road trip from the top of California to the bottom and back. And this is a little bit different structure than I usually conduct my podcast, but I am just going to give you 6 different locations that you can travel to if you want to do this road trip. And so basically, as I mentioned, it's the Pacific Coast Highway, but it also kind of extends farther than that, pretty much all along Highway 101 or Route 1, depending on where you are. And it's basically just driving from coast to coast in California. This is a really unique road trip, I think, because, it is all through one state, which is really nice, but something that is really interesting about this particular road trip is you're really getting a lot of different environments. You're getting a lot of different types of weather. You're getting a lot of different natural attractions. And so whether that be the beach or the mountains or, valleys, you're kind of able to explore top to bottom all throughout California. And in my opinion, I think California is one of the most beautiful states. I don't know why, but before I traveled there, I really I pretty much assumed that California was Los Angeles, and that was kind of the only opinion that I had of California. But through this road trip that I took, I really was able to realize that California has so much to offer, and it is so diverse in the way that it looks, in the type of people that are there, diverse in so many different ways. And so, as I mentioned, I have done this trip before. However, I unfortunately got the flu while I was there. And so, although I did do the entire drive by myself, I have to be honest that I don't remember too much, and I definitely would like to do it again when I am in better health. And so just to give you a little bit of a guide, it takes about 13 hours from top to bottom, to get to California. And so for the most part, as I said, this route does include the Pacific Coast Highway. But again, I want to be able to give you a whole stretch of all of California. And before I get exactly into which places that I think that are worthwhile for you to stop on the way, I want to talk a little bit about road trips. And road trips are some of my favorite forms of travel, and I definitely would like to have a whole road trip episode because I think they are a great way of traveling and a way that, maybe not as many people tap into or access, but definitely something very exciting. I think if you're gonna do a road trip, you need to have some guidelines. Definitely do long road trips with at least another person, and you better really like the person that you're doing it with or the people that you're doing with it, because you're gonna be in basically trapped in a small box with them for many hours at a time. A lot of times just with driving and moving around and traveling in general, unexpected things can pop up, stressful things can pop up. So it's really important to go with someone or a group of people who you're very comfortable with and who I would say are similar to you in the ways that you like to travel. And so if you're someone who likes to fly by the seat of their pants and, not plan every single thing, travel with people like that. If you're a type of person who needs everything to be, exactly thought out and written down, and you want to have a map in hand, then, you might want to pair with someone who is also similar to that. But as I said, road trips have made for some of the best traveling that I've done. I think it gives you a freedom that a lot of other travel does not have, especially, city travel, or if you're going to, on a plane to another country in general. Having a car for me is kind of like extra added safety. It also just gives me so much more freedom than I would have in any other way. Being able to, especially for long road trips, kind of deciding where you want to stop and when you want to stop. And if you're tired this day, you can stop early. And if you are, feeling good, you can drive the whole way. And I think that that is really unique. And especially with, a 13-hour road trip in particular, I mean, you could stretch this out to be 13 days long. You could stretch it out to be a day. You could do 2 days. It's really up to you. I've given you 6 different cities to stop into. All of these are places that you can absolutely stay for at least a day, hopefully more. But there are also places that you can stop in and have lunch. You can, stop in and get a quick hike in and continue on your drive. And I think that that is, like I said, just a really great part about road trips. You have all of that freedom. So I'm going to move right into it. Here are the 6 places that I think are worth it for your time and for your money, for you to go to if you are road tripping in California. So starting with the most north, we have Eureka, Santa Rosa, San Francisco, Big Sur, of course LA, and San Diego. Now, as I mentioned, these places have so much diversity to them. I mean, Eureka versus San Diego, the most north and the most south are just, it's like you're in completely different states. And I think that that's really interesting and really makes for an awesome trip. And you really are going to get so much out of this. So I'm going to move right into Eureka, which is where we're going to start. And just as a precursor, it does not matter which direction you choose to go to start or to finish. It does make sense to do them in this order, whether you start with the beginning or at the end, because they obviously are all next to each other. However, I assumed, so when I went, I ended up flying into LA because it was so much cheaper than flying into Eureka, which was really shocked me and surprised me. Because Eureka is obviously a little bit less popular, but maybe less flights. And so I found that, flying into LA and going south to north was the most cost effective. But as I said, I'd say look for whichever one has the best flights. Or if you want to go warm to cold, cold to warm, completely up to you. So Eureka is Northern California. Northern California in general is absolutely gorgeous. It kind of reminds me of New England in a lot of ways. It reminds me of the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, it's kind of almost grouped in there. And it is home to Olympia National Park. And that is where we're going to be starting. And this is where the redwoods live. And if you don't know what the redwoods are, they're a massive species of tree that live in Northern California. And they are just unbelievable. They were at the top of my bucket list. It's the reason why I went on my trip in the first place. And to me, they're just a world wonder. I've never seen something so beautiful naturally before. And I feel like I could spend a year there just observing the trees, and, being able to see something like that is really, not something I get to see often at all. And it is so worth it, I have to say. If you've been thinking about doing it, please do it. It is so amazing. Back to Eureka in that area. Eureka is technically a city, but when I'm talking about Eureka, I am talking about the surrounding areas and like the Redwood Forest and the National Park. And so you kind of have so many resources that you are really able to use while you're here. So unlike the rest of these places, it is very, very rural, you could say, because of the national park. And so you kind of have to plan what is best for you. Now you have lots of options for staying places. It's a residential area, and so with that comes really nice Airbnbs. And I would suggest if you're going to, stay overnight here, get somewhere that's, less of an apartment and more of like a small home or a cabin or something like that. Because a lot of this trip is going to be kind of that relaxing downtime. And so, like I said, you could do an Airbnb. You could, of course, go camping. I mean, that's a huge part of that area, is a great campsites. But, of course, another option, which I think is something I'd like to do personally, is there are a ton of cabins that you can rent. Some of them are very high-end, glamorous, and then some of them are more laid back. A lot of them are really minimalistic, kind of that tiny home style, and you can rent these cabins, very inexpensive. A lot of supplies is provided for you, which I think is really nice, especially if you are on that road trip, you're trying to save space. But as I said, this is probably somewhere where you're going to spend a lot of time, so it's something you want to invest in, right? When you're a city, you can be out all morning, all evening, all night, and you just sleep at the place that you're staying. This place is a lot of daytime recreation and then kind of unwinding at night. So let's talk about things that we can do here. Obviously, there's hiking. I mean, this place, if you even have the slightest bit of interest in hiking, you have to go here. You can do an hour-long hike. You could do a 10-hour-long hike. You could, stop and walk around on a loop, like not even uphill at all. You could do something a little bit more, treacherous, a little bit more of a steep incline, but you have to get out into those woods. You have to go experience it. There's wildlife. There's, different types of tree species. There's tours. You have a lot of options here, in terms of hiking. But this is also a great place for outdoor recreation in general. Outdoor recreation of all kinds. So there's kayaking, canoeing, rock climbing, rappelling, zip line, stuff like that. Because of the nature of what's happening, there's a lot of those types of activities and companies that are going to do something like that. And so I would definitely suggest really using this time to get outdoors and really use this time to soak up the very unique environment that is the Redwood Forest. However, if you are more interested in just sticking to the city, which is totally okay, there are a lot of local shops in Eureka, which is really interesting. It's much more of a big town vibe as opposed to a city vibe, but of course there are, like any city, landmarks and tours and museums. When I was looking up things to do, there's escape rooms, there's a Sequoia Park Zoo, which was established in 1907. It's the oldest zoo in California, and it's actually one of the smallest zoos in the country, but it's situated right next to the redwoods. And it really, as I say, is the heart of Eureka. So it has a lot of draws every day from tourists, but also locals. And obviously it's very kid friendly. So you'll see schools and families here, and, as well as students and researchers, which I find really interesting. And so this is a good place if you are interested in animals or conservation or education. If you have kids with you, this Sequoia, Park Zoo is a great option for you towards the city. So we've gone through Eureka. There's the city. There is the Redwood National Park. This is a place for you to relax and unwind and get in touch with nature. After the break, we are going to keep moving south, and we're going to go to Santa Rosa, which will be the next city, and that is after this break.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
And we are back from our break. before the break, I talked to you about the breakdown of how this podcast episode is going to work. I talked to you about road tripping, how road trip works, how much I like road trips, and then of course I talked to you about Eureka and our northmost stop that we will be making. Up next, we are going to travel farther south to Santa Rosa, but before that, I'm going to give you just one quick tip and trick on road trips during each of these mini segments, just to give you guys a little bit of kind of prep for a road trip. I'm going to talk to you guys about the food that I really like to eat on road trips. This is an essential part to any road trip. A lot of times, food is kind of, you have to plan it out, and it can actually take up a lot of your time if you're stopping for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I like to come super prepared with snacks, and it's also just kind of easier and makes the time go by faster, I think, when you're snacking. A couple of snacks I like to have are goldfish. I get the huge giant bin of them, and then also something that I have started picking up on road trips that I now cannot road trip without are cherries, with the pit in them, or any fruit that you have to bite on in order to eat it. And the reason why I really enjoyed this is because when you're driving and you have nothing to do, you get really bored, and so I find kind of doing anything or having anything little just to do or to, it takes a little bit of effort in order to eat it. I think that works really well for me for some reason, and so maybe you would like cherries or goldfish when you're road tripping. But moving on to Santa Rosa, which is our next city, again, a little bit farther south, just to give you a landmark of where we are. It is 55 miles north of San Francisco, and like I said, just a little bit farther south than Eureka. Santa Rosa is a really eco-friendly place, and it has, fresh food, healthy people, and that can be a really big perk. So something that I increasingly look for in places to stay is places that encourage healthy living. And I say this because if you like to work out, if you like to eat healthy, like I do, this is something that can be a bit of a struggle a lot of times when you are traveling, especially when you're on a road trip. I mean, you're literally sitting stationary in a car. And that is something, like I said, I kind of struggle with it because I always feel like I'm cheating or I'm getting off of my, workout routine or my eating routine, and it can be really hard to move back towards that routine once you've broken it for a long time and, eating out and all of these things. And so, coming to a place like Santa Rosa where all of that is encouraged, I'm able to get, healthy food. I'm able to get my workout in, whether that be, a hike or a walk around the city, or a lot of times I'll look for an Airbnb or a hotel or a hostel that has a gym. Something little like that can really help me, and it can make me feel fueled, and it can make me feel energized for my traveling day. Anyway, so Santa Rosa is definitely one of those cities, but the thing that Santa Rosa is known for is its wineries. Santa Rosa is just about the location that would be called wine country. It's really close to Napa Valley, and so you can certainly get this experience while you're staying here. And wine in general is something I wish I knew more about. I wish I was one of those adults who knew a lot about wine, and I certainly don't, but this would be a great place for you to learn if you are interested. And I had to do some research on winery when I was looking into Santa Rosa, and this is basically the gist, and something you will certainly learn more if you do spend time in Santa Rosa and if you do, take that tour at a winery. But viticulture is basically the art of cultivating grapes, and it has been around for a really long time. It's best known for its origin to be in Italy, which, that's kind of what we think about when we think about wineries, but it's also important to mention that wine has been around for much longer than that. Its earliest prehistory of wine country actually involves the habitation of several Native American tribes from approximately 8,000 BC. And so we know that it's been around for quite a long time, and it's been specifically in the area of that is now Santa Rosa, California, for a very, very long time. There are over 800 wineries in this area, and because of that, there are plenty of hotels and restaurants and exhibits that kind of go along with it that are either, a part of the winery tour that provides services for it. And so you are really going to be able to get your full experience if that is something that you're interested in doing. Let's say you're not interested in wineries or anything like that. Santa Rosa is also on the ocean, although it isn't always warm there year round. So if you're planning to go for the water, make sure you go in one of the summer months or at least the spring. But as I mentioned, Santa Rosa just has this general fun vibe. It's certainly a city, but it does kind of have that big town, lots of smaller buildings, which can be really nice. It's got this great downtown area. And something that I wasn't expecting when I spent some time there is it's quite family oriented. It's a really big mix of kind of this like family friendly area. And then also obviously it has a lot of, it caters towards adults quite a bit based on the fact that it is, centered around wineries. And so definitely, like I said, if you want to do it, spend some time here exploring the wineries. There's also just an amazing environment. It is quite close to a lot of nature. Napa Valley in general is obviously, fields and farms and quite a peaceful place. And I, during my research, found out that there are quite a lot of spas. And so if that's something you're interested in, if you want to, relax and unwind in that way, definitely indulge in a spa or a resort or something like that. There is also a lot of outdoor recreation that takes place here, and that is something that I've noticed is a trend throughout most of California, is lots of options for outdoor recreation, but there's zip lining tours, which is really interesting. You can take explorations out on a hot air balloon, which is so incredible. There are all of these small, 4-person airplane rides that you can go on. And then, of course, something that's really popular to do in Santa Rosa is skydiving. And so if you're a bit of adrenaline junkie and you're interested in doing something like that, Santa Rosa could also be the place for you. Okay, so just as a recap, Santa Rosa has wineries. It has got a fascinating downtown life, very artsy, very family oriented. It has a plethora of outdoor recreation to be had. It's got spas and a very peaceful environment. Definitely a place for a lot of different kind of people. Okay, we are going to move on to our break. We are going to keep virtually driving south, and we are going to hit that big city of San Francisco, and that is going to be after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back from our break. Before the break, I talked to you about Eureka first, and then we talked all about Santa Rosa. Now, coming up, moving even farther south, we are going to talk about that big city of San Francisco. This is going to be the first, really big city we're coming across in this road trip. It is known for so many things, but including the Golden Gate Bridge. It's known for its really unique and amazing architecture. It's got those trolleys. It's known for the arts. It's known for Chinatown. The art district in particular is really incredible. And something that is really interesting to me about San Francisco is how, despite the fact that it is quite a large city, it is surrounded by so much nature. So I'm going to give you guys some history on San Francisco. We're going to talk about different things you can do in San Francisco. But first, I'm going to give you my second tip or trick for going on a road trip. And that is going to be my ideal number of people for a road trip. And that is usually 3, maybe 4. The reason why I say that is because if you have 3 people on a road trip, you can always have one person sleeping and then 2 people awake. And something that you have to be cautious about for road tripping is drowsy driving. And that is something that I try to avoid at all costs. And so if you have 3 people, there's always an option for someone to be sleeping, getting that rest, and then for 2 people to be awake in the front seat. If you have another person who is, awake with you, you're much less likely to fall asleep at the wheel. You could have 4 people. The more people you start adding is the less room you kind of have in the car, but totally up to you. 3 or 4 people is definitely my ideal. Anyway, moving on to San Francisco. There's so much to do here. I mean, it is such a major city. I mean, if you could think about things you would usually do in a city, all of these are options in San Francisco. Something about San Francisco is, it is supposedly becoming increasingly gentrified, and it's supposed to be a very overpopulated city in general. However, as I mentioned, something that I found to be unique was that it did have a lot of nature in it, and it almost felt like as I was driving into it, you were kind of driving out of the woods and then all of a sudden you're inside of a city, and I think that you usually don't get that with a lot of cities. It typically tends to be a lot of suburb area and a lot of nothing kind of before you enter a city. So if you are interested in that kind of traditional city touring options, I'm going to recommend you, something that they have in San Francisco, which is called the City Pass. They have it in a few other, states as well. But this is a way to save money on activities, help with transportation, and it's going to make lines a lot faster. And that really is only if you are looking to do those kind of very touristy, lay of the land, I'm just staying in the city for, a few days type of thing. And that's totally okay if you want to do that. City Pass is going to be a way for you to save money on that. And it's going to be a great organized way for you to, explore the city in a very safe way. In terms of staying in places, especially if I'm staying in a city, you can check out hostels, but your best bet almost always is an Airbnb. They've really created this monopoly on traveling and sleeping in places because it's so much less expensive than a hotel and a lot nicer than a hostel. And if you're staying with a few people, it's usually just about the same price. On the topic of Airbnbs, a really great resource in general and a great resource that I have been using to build this episode is usually on Airbnb, there comes with kind of this list of items to do when you're in a city. It's kind of a list of activities. It has pricing. It has a lot of options. And I just thought, particularly in San Francisco, there were a lot of them that I thought were so interesting and also really, kind of obscure, but something that I totally like to do when I'm visiting a city. And so some of them are how to throw a delicious dumpling party. This is where you take a, cooking class on how to make dumplings and then you can learn how to serve them at your apartment. I thought that was cool. There's another one called Hippie to Hipster Neighborhood Walks, and it's just kind of exploring, the vast differences of neighborhoods that exist in the city, beginning surfing lessons, San Francisco Bay sailing awesomeness. You can learn how to sail, epic alpaca tours. I mean, as you can see, there's so much to offer and really something for everyone. And so if you want to look to have a more specific or enriching experience, I suggest checking out what Airbnb has to offer and just what the city has to offer in general. I think a lot of people know San Francisco and are familiar with it. And so instead of giving you this, general overview, I think I'd just like to talk about a few different things that you can do and a few different specific things that I think would be worth your time and that are interesting to me and what I think would be interesting to a wide group, or a wide audience. And so the first thing I'm going to say is visiting Alcatraz. Now, Alcatraz is about a mile off of the coastline, and you can actually, see it from a lot of different places in San Francisco. If you don't know what Alcatraz is, it used to be a fort, and then it was a military prison, and then what it's most commonly known for was from 1934 until March 22nd, 1963, it was a maximum security federal penitentiary, and what it's known for, and the reason why I think people are interested in it, is it was notorious for being unescapable. The whole prison is on a 22-acre mini island, and it's entirely, obviously, because it's an island surrounded by water, but it was supposed to be very choppy, kind of dangerous water, and, you kind of get the point on that. It's supposed to be this, big, scary, unescapable prison that's obviously very high security. And actually, it's a national park, which I didn't know, and so you can go and take a tour of it. Actually, 1.5 million visitors go on to Alcatraz every year, and in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of people from San Francisco, it's kind of a must-see when you're staying there. I always love to learn some history when I'm visiting, any place, and this is certainly a unique opportunity to explore that bit of history more, and something that you don't usually see. I don't often learn bits of history about a prison in a city, and so this is definitely a unique opportunity, and so check out Alcatraz if you are in San Francisco. Moving on to some other options for you. The San Francisco Aquarium is very well known. It's called Aquarium of the Bay, and going to aquariums are always fun. You can get them, almost anywhere, but I think seeing the way that different ones are set up, seeing what, different, marine life each aquarium has to offer, and then of course, just like a museum or anything else, it's gonna be independent, it's gonna be unique, and it's a really great way to, in my opinion, spend your time. And I think this is great if you have a large group of people. This is also great if you have children, and it's very age inclusive and age friendly, which I really enjoy. And so I just wanted to read something off of the front page of their website that you can find. And it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it says it has a mission to enable conservations on climate, resilience, and ocean conservation globally while inspiring actionable change locally by protection and preservation of the San Francisco Bay and its ecosystems from Sierra to the sea. And it has 20,000 local marine animals. As I mentioned, it's very kid-friendly, and this is just really important in general, and this is a travel podcast, and so I will not try to stray too far into conservation, but I think that is something that as a whole country and really as a whole world, we need to be learning more about. It's something that I want to learn more about, and so if you are interested in conservation, or even if you're not interested and you just want to hear more about it, this would be a great place and a great opportunity to kind of educate yourself while having a wonderful day at the aquarium. So as I mentioned, it's quite vast. 20,000 local marine animals live there. They have a couple of clear tunnel exhibits, and one of them has sharks and rays and all of these different very dangerous looking animals will kind of soar above you, and you kind of get to walk through and see sharks right next to you, which is kind of amazing. They also have this exhibit called Come Face to Fin, and you can pet certain different types of animals like bay rays, skates, leopard sharks, tide pool animals like sea stars and sea cucumbers, and it's an interactive lab station, which I find really interesting. And so if that's something you're interested in, then I think that you can absolutely explore that. Another option that you have is going to the San Francisco Zoo. But it could be also an alternative if you, like me, have seen one too many zoos in your life. So coming up, moving right along out of San Francisco, we are gonna move on to one of my favorite places in the country, which is called Big Sur, California. I'm very excited to talk about it, and we will be hearing about that right after the break.
always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Back from our break. Before the break, I talked about the big city of San Francisco, and now we are going to continue to move south onto one of my favorite places ever, which is called Big Sur, California. It is an amazing surf town. I think the nature of this portion of the trip is incredible, and for this whole drive, you are just, I've never driven in an area similar to this ever. You are literally just on the edges of cliffs. It's very safe, don't worry, but it really does have some amazing natural views, as well as amazing architecture and houses that are just kind of hidden in all different places. Like, some houses just built completely into the side of a cliff. Some truly fascinating and unique bridges, and obviously some gorgeous water. And so, to kind of continue to give you an idea of where we are, it is 150 miles south of San Francisco and then 300 miles north of Los Angeles. So we're kind of halfway through California almost at this point. My next road trip tip that I want to give you guys seems really simple, but it's really important, especially in terms of saving time and ultimately saving some gas money. And that is to make sure you are exactly planning up your times you need to stop with when you need to get gas. And so that includes when you're switching and changing drivers, when you're stopping to get food, so on and so forth. You always want to make sure that that is going to line up for you in terms of when you need to stop for gas. I promise you this will save so much time. It'll save gas money, and you will probably overall just be a little bit happier on your road trip. And so moving right into Big Sur in general, it's this time in the road trip that we start to see a lot of changes in environment. And that is something that, as I mentioned on this road trip, is kind of the best part, honestly, in my opinion, of the actual driving, is just kind of being able to step into so many different worlds, being able to kind of look at so many different things, I think is so special. And, you know, when I did this drive, and when I hope I get to do this drive again, it makes me feel very lucky that I am able to do these types of traveling things. And so if you can spare the money to do so, I think this is a trip absolutely worth it. And again, you are really able to see so many different things like Eureka and Big Sur and eventually, LA. Those are all three very different environments, very different, types of people, and you're going to get different attractions there. And so I just want to give you a short history on Big Sur because I find it really fascinating. And so I want to read, just to give you as accurate as possible, I'm going to read you something that I found on bigsurcalifornia.org. It reads as follows. At the turn of the century, Big Sur sustained a larger population than it does today. A vigorous redwood lumbering industry provided livelihoods for many. The Old Coast Trail, which had been the only link between homesteads, was still little more than a wagon trail. Steamers transported heavy goods and supplies and harbored at Notley's Landing, Parrington Cove, and the mouth of the Little Sur River. Navigation was treacherous, and in 1889, the Point Sur Lighthouse Station began sending its powerful beam to protect ships from the hazards of the coastline. In 1937, the present highway was completed after 18 years of construction and at a considerable expense, even with the aid of convict labor. The highway has since been declared California's first scenic highway, and it provides a driving experience unsurpassed in natural beauty and scenic variety. Electricity did not arrive in Big Sur until the early 1950s, and it still does not extend the length of the coast in or into some of the remote mountainous areas. And so that's kind of the small piece of history that I find very fascinating. And I think what they mentioned about putting a lighthouse for ships to not crash into the cliff's edges, it kind of looks like something out of a movie. It looks like the area in which like an evil villain from a movie would live, because it has these like huge cliffs and the water really does come right up to it. And so some people might call it scary. I find it so, fascinating and beautiful and gorgeous. But that's just a little bit of history for you about Big Sur. Now kind of getting into what you might want to do when you're in Big Sur. Here's the thing. A lot of activity is going to be self-driven recreation. If you're into surfing, then this is a place you need to go. You're going to be all set. It's a really great place in California to surf. It's easy to rent equipment, and there's a big surfing culture in general within that area. And if you like surfing, then that's great. Your problem is totally solved. All of these other things that I'll say are just kind of, options for you. However, if you're not a surfer, pretty much everything in this area is going to have to do with the ocean or the views. And so if you're coming from, busy San Francisco, take your time and unwind and go to the beach or tuck yourself away in a comfy cabin in the woods. Really spend some time here in this unique nature, because it is more mellow than San Francisco or the LA is going to be. It's not something that has a million different tours and excursions and things you can go pay to do. And I think that there is a lot of weight to that, and that can be really good sometimes. I've been trying to conduct research of my own on the benefits of unwinding in natural settings for when you are going on vacation, but for now, I'm just going to share with you what the experts have to say, and this is an excerpt that I want to read from asla.org. It says, "Feeling down? Go outside. A recent study found just 5 minutes of activity in natural areas resulted in improvements in self-esteem and mood. There's an intuitive link between nature and well-being. Office workers don't post posters in their cubicles with pictures of gorgeous natural scenes for no reason. Parks and trees, gardens, and campgrounds make us feel more at ease. In general, the more time we spend outside in nature, the better our mental health will be. The result of multiple research studies out of the United Kingdom have shown that spending time outside has known and measurable benefits to our mental health and well-being. Spending a few minutes outside in a park has both short-term and long-term positive mental health benefits." And so that's just something I wanted to say because I think that oftentimes when traveling, you kind of get caught up in that need for constant stimulation and need to constantly be experiencing something new and going to a museum and taking pictures in shopping malls and kind of doing all these things. When really I think some of the best traveling I have done has been towards and about and for nature. And it's something that has really helped me be able to find kind of peace and calmness, especially when I'm traveling, especially when a lot of my options are more up in the air and I have less control in my life. I found that, taking a day or two, like a big road trip like this or anything like that, taking a day or two to kind of reflect in a beautiful place, even if it's a place you've never been, but a place seated in nature, whether that be in the ocean, in the mountains, wherever you may choose to go, being in that natural space is so healthy and can really give you the energy that you need to continue on to your trip. And I think it's going to give you the energy you need if you stop here along your way to kind of push through to our next more southern city, which of course is Los Angeles, which as we know is a gorgeous, beautiful place. I can't wait to talk about it, but it's also a place that is crowded and busy and filled with, materialism and so on and so forth. And so I find that, stopping in Big Sur and being able to see all of the beautiful natural things that place has to offer is really going to gear you up and kind of energize you and re-energize you at this point in the trip for your time in Los Angeles. And so after the break, I am going to try as best as I can in, 10 minutes to talk to you about all of the wonders that is Los Angeles.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We are back from our break. Before the break, I talked to you about a very special place to me called Big Sur, California, that we are stopping on this virtual road trip that is actually kind of approaching an end. And I'm going to be talking about Los Angeles next, of course. Before I even start to dive in, I wanted to talk about my next road trip tip, which is it's really important to keep all passengers in the road trip really engaged and involved. And a lot of times for me, I've learned that, playing little games, doing different kind of brain activities are great ways to do that. And so it's also a great opportunity. I never cease to learn more about the person that I am on the road trip with better, even if I knew them really closely before. And I think a way that this happens, and a really great way to bond on a road trip and also to keep people awake, is to, ask questions. You can find games online that have a lot of different, interesting questions like, what's your favorite childhood memory? What's your favorite color? Even really simple things like that, can be really fun to do on a road trip. And like I said, it's a great opportunity to continue to get to know people. And so make sure you play mental games with yourself and with others on your road trip. Okay, we are going to move on to Los Angeles. This place needs no introduction. It is known for its stars, its bad traffic, its huge city life. And I certainly would love to make an entire episode on Los Angeles, and I probably will someday, but for now, we're gonna try to keep it as short and simple as possible as you could talking about Los Angeles. But I'm just gonna try to give you some interesting facts and then also some guidelines when you are traveling there and how it's all gonna fit into our road trip that we are virtually taking today. So, some facts about LA. It is 472 square miles, and as of 2016, about 4 million people live there. People who are living there are from more than 140 different countries, speaking 224 different identified languages. Something interesting about LA is its makeup. It is 48.6% Hispanic or Latino, 26% white, 15% Asian/Pacific Islander, and 9% African American, and 1.4% American Indian or other. And that's from the 2008 U.S. Census, just to give you some resources on that, which is really interesting. Definitely a diverse area, a diverse city in general. And with a $807 billion annual output, Los Angeles County ranks among the world's largest economy. Its GDP, which seems insane to talk about just, LA County in general, but it would rank number 19 in the world if it were to be a standalone nation. It's larger than Switzerland and Saudi Arabia, and it's right behind the Netherlands and Turkey. This just seems insane, absolutely insane that it can, rank higher than an actual country itself. I found these facts on discoverlosangeles.com, and if you want to hear more stats and facts like this, you can visit that website. Those are just some ones that stood out to me as really interesting. I also had to look up why it was called Los Angeles in the first place, and it's because on September 4th, 1789, the city had its official birth date. It was 44 village settlers from Mexican provinces of Sonora and Sinaloa made their home what is now downtown Los Angeles. 2 of the 44 settlers were Spaniards, while the other ones were Indians, black and mestizos of mixed ancestries, and the Spanish were the ones who named the new settlement. And I have to say, I really don't know how to speak Spanish, and I don't want to butcher this whole name, but it essentially in Spanish meant the town of Our Lady and the Queen of the Angels, and so it just kind of got nicknamed Los Angeles instead of that entirely long name, again in Spanish, which I really should not even try to do on air. After the territory changed hands from Spain to Mexico, the town was officially declared a city in 1835, and Los Angeles became a part of the U.S. in January of 1847. So just some history for you. And moving on to some fun facts about LA. It is the entertainment capital of the world, and it's the only city in North America to have ever hosted the Summer Olympics twice. And in 2028, it will be for the 3rd time. Very fascinating. Downtown LA is the largest government center outside of Washington, D.C., and a very obscure fact that I found when I was researching Los Angeles, it has the only remaining wooden lighthouse in the state and the largest historical theater district on the National Register of Historic Places, and that's located downtown on Broadway. So it is a massive task to be able to explain Los Angeles, or to be able to help anyone listening in any way try to take on LA and what to do. But I'm just going to try to break down for you some of those top tourist activities that I'm sure most of us already kind of know about. But here are the ones that when I was researching seemed to be the most attractive. And first off, we have the Walk of Fame, which is really nice because it's free. The Hollywood Walk of Fame is right downtown. It's where, essentially, if you don't know, a bunch of famous people have their name on a star that's in the ground. And it's all through downtown LA, as I mentioned, and the construction of the Walk of Fame began February 8th, 1960, and a filmmaker named Stanley Kramer, who is the director of a bunch of movies, including The Defiant Ones, Inherit the Wind, Judgment at Nuremberg, and It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, was the first honoree to ever have a star down, and that was March 28th, 1960. And of the 2,600 plus stars that currently make up the Walk of Fame, 46% of them are in motion pictures, which makes total sense. And that's followed by television, which is 24%, music, which is 17%, radio, which is 10%, which is quite large, and then live performance, which is less than 2%. And that would be like, professional boxers or something like that have kind of become stars themselves. And so that is the Walk of Fame. You can definitely do that. I mean, downtown LA is very busy and there's a million different things to do there, but walking on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is definitely one of them. Los Angeles County Museum of Art currently is under construction, but is still open. It's a big art museum, great for kids and adult, and it always has a new exhibition going on, so you can definitely check that out. There's, of course, Universal Studios in Hollywood. It's a film studio and a theme park. Its official marketing headline is the entertainment capital of LA. It is very expensive. But if you are interested in that type of thing, which I will not speak too much on, if you are interested in doing Universal, then you should absolutely go do it. It's a must-do experience if that is what you're interested in. It was formed April 30th of 1912. A not so fun fact that I came across upon in my research is that Universal Studios, has been damaged by 9 fires throughout its history, and the last one was just in 2008, which seems like a very large number of fires happening. Okay, next up, we have the Grove. The Grove is a massive shopping center. It opened February in 2002, and it's 600,000 square feet, which seems insane. And so if shopping is something that's interesting to you, or you just want a place that has lots of restaurant options, definitely check out the Grove. of course, you've got the Santa Monica Pier with the beach, and it has the big Ferris wheel and boardwalks and piers, and it's got this really fun beach vibe. A lot of people are on bikes and roller skates and so on and so forth. There really are so many things to do, and it's just a really great place to kind of have fun, especially, at night or so on and so forth. You will, LA in general is just a lot of fun. If you come here, you will be spending a lot of money. Just as a heads up, there's really not a lot of ways to get around LA not spending a lot of money. However, there are endless housing options that you can choose from. So hostel, Airbnb, or if you really wanted a hotel, you can do that. My suggestion for an area to stay in would be a place like West Hollywood. I think it's a bit quieter, but still kind of, close to everything. However, close to everything, I say, with a grain of salt, because LA is a very spread out city. And so I would considering renting bikes. You really can't walk all of LA. Like I said, it's just too big, and Ubering everywhere is so expensive, and public transit, because of all the traffic, can take a really, really long time. And so that was my very quick synopsis of LA. It's a place that I feel like so many people, kind of should go to and can go to, and will find something to go to. Okay, so that is LA. We are almost done with our road trip. We are getting to our very last stop, which is San Diego, and we'll hear all about that right after the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we are back from our break. It was our last break. We're almost wrapping up here. We have talked about so many different places to go. And the last one we talked about was, of course, Los Angeles. And our very last trip, our most southern spot that we will be stopping at is going to be San Diego. And San Diego is a wonderful city. It's known to be extremely laid back. It has amazing beaches. There's a lot to it. But before we get to that, I want to give you my last road tripping tip, which is this seems so simple, but make it as fun as possible. Like I said, you have so much flexibility with the road trip, and some of my best road trip experiences have been on the spontaneous things that I've done while I was on a road trip, not at all going towards the destination. things like in Northern California, in between Eureka and San Francisco, there is a massive Bigfoot Emporium store just on the side of the road. It has a bunch of Bigfoot merch. And the last time that I did this trip, I just randomly stopped and I picked up a t-shirt, and I still have it. And that was one of the highlights, weirdly enough, one of the highlights of my trips, just little things like that. Stopping in little towns that you would never, ever, ever go to unless you were on a road trip. Doing stuff like that is really what makes a road trip a road trip. Moving on to San Diego. It's got an extremely laid-back vibe, amazing beaches. It's 120 miles south of Los Angeles, and it's immediately adjacent to the border with Mexico. It's got an estimated population of 1,400,000 people. That's of July 2018. And it's the 8th largest city in the United States and the 2nd largest in California. Obviously, that's second behind LA. In 2018, like I said, the population was, about 1,400,000, 1,500,000 maybe. San Diego it is a really major city in California. I think it's a very visited place. It's located on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, like all of these places are that we've been thinking about, in Southern California. And, like I said, it's really close to the border of Mexico, which I find, really interesting. And that is always going to bring a certain culture in, to a city. And so moving on, it is about 372 square miles. It has a really low elevation, so it's only 62 feet above sea level, which is something interesting. And then San Diego has been called the, quote, birthplace of California. There are endless options to choose from in terms of spending your time in any major city, and especially in this major city. But I'm going to try to give you just a few options that you can take with you. And one of them is Balboa Park, which is this massive park, but also it's kind of the station for tourism. It is a station for nature. And it has 16 museums, multiple performing arts venues. It's got gardens and trails and creative and recreational attractions. And some of that includes the San Diego Zoo, which I will definitely talk about. I mean, you could honestly probably walk in here and stay for the entire day because of how many options you have, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of history, and this is all according to sandiego.org. Balboa Park is central to the story of San Diego. In 1868, civil leaders took the audacious steps of setting aside 1,400 acres of scrub, filled mesa, an area that now overlooks what is downtown San Diego. While San Diego was home to just 2,300 residents back then, its leaders had a vision and desire to create an iconic park that would serve its citizens and visitors for years to come. So, I mean, this is a park that was built so long ago, and it definitely had, the people who created it had a vision, and that vision absolutely came true. Something else I'm going to move on to is the San Diego Zoo, which is inside of Balboa Park, and it houses over 3,700 animals from more than 650 species and subspecies, which is very vast for a zoo. I think it's so interesting to see this. The San Diego Zoo was a pioneer in the concept of open-air, cageless exhibits that recreate natural animal habitats, which, as we know, can be really important. And it is one of the only zoos in the world that houses and successfully breeds the giant panda. Just as an interest, if you're interested in any of that, definitely go to the San Diego Zoo. Kind of moving on to another thing that you can do. I don't often talk about nightlife on this podcast, but I kind of have to when I'm talking about San Diego, because one of the most popular nightlife atmospheres is a area of San Diego called the Gas Lamp District. It has nightclubs, dive bars, lounges, and more. It's a really great, fun place to go if you're looking to go out in an area. And in the daytime, it has streets with shop vendors, and it has this heavy art and music scene, which I find really fascinating. And so this is also another place you could stay all day. It's great day or night. And, so that's pretty much, San Diego. I mean, obviously there's so much more. There's art, there's history, there's zoos, there's aquariums, there's, shopping, something that every city has, but it's also unique in its own right. And there are, like I said, so many options for anyone who wants to come here. That is going to be where we end our road trip. Again, road trips are just so fun. They just always happen to be, the best experiences. They're the experiences that I'm always, least expecting, but something that never ceases to make a very full time for traveling. Always worth it. Usually saves me a bit of money. If you want to do this road trip, please do. It doesn't matter where you start or end. I started mine actually in LA and then went farther north. That was because the flights were cheaper, but you can start and end at any point in this road trip. You can do really anything with it. That's the beauty of a road trip. That is going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Again, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, and if you can, writing a nice review really, really helps us. Also, if you could follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, feel free to DM me. I would love to respond to anything. Let me know what you want to hear on this podcast. Thank you so much and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.